In the month of March in the year 1759, a British engineer stationed in the town of Louisbourg on the island of Cape Breton was ordered to locate a group of Acadian settlers who lived on the far-flung and relatively unexplored western shores of the Bredor Lakes. That engineer was John Montresor, a man known today for his journals, which captured his travels across the North American continent during both the 7 Years' War and the American War of Independence. In total, it would have been an almost 200-kilometer round trip across frozen rivers, through thick forests, and over the frozen Bredor Lakes. The following is Montresor's personal record of the trip as found in the Montresor Journals.
Journal of a Route from Louisbourg to Lake Labrador, taken with a pocket compass, and the distances computed with what remarks and observations that could be obtained at that season, as it was winter and the snow nearly 5 feet in depth. John Montresor. 1759, March 27th. 1 officer, 26 rangers, 3 private men of the 45th Regiment and volunteers, the whole consisting of 40 men, were detached from the garrison by order of His Excellency Brigadier General Whitmore, Governor of Louisbourg, and to proceed on an inland scout, directing to Lake Labrador, from thence to Pointe la Jeunesse, a point of land so called from the name of a man that settled there, one Le Jeune. So to cross the lake again to Labadic, bearing north from thence, where there is a small straggling settlement near the Sawmill River, to bring in what French Acadians we could find inhabiting those parts. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the party marched from the garrison to the blockhouse, and from thence to the 4-mile house, where they halted and refreshed, being 4 miles from the blockhouse, where a party of rangers under the command of Elf Crofton during the siege ambuscaded a body of the enemy's Indians, 2 of which were killed and scalped within 10 yards of the road. From thence the party marched to the 6-mile bridge, 6 miles from the blockhouse. This bridge is laid across the run or rivulet that leads to Cabinet Planchy, which is a number of small lakes joined together, the borders of which producing good wood for cabinet work. The house, well furnished, was a boarded house. This was destroyed. They continued their march, a course west for near a mile, the land producing birch, beech, fir, maple, and hemlock trees. The country pretty open in comparison to the first part of this march. The land very good, and but little underwood. Course northwest, steep for 1 mile from the western course, then forms a valley producing firs and spruce. There's a pretty good road made across this swamp by laying saplings or spars across, so tied down with a small ditch at each side to drain off the water. This valley runs to the bridge, 3.5 miles from Portic's farm. The bridge over Rivière des Trois Lacs is 60 feet in length, running from Lac Alerty to the first of the 3 lakes. The course from hence west for a mile, then the road is laid out due north. Past a very steep mountain, whose summit or pitch is not the least commanded. Its rise is about 600 yards, whose range runs parallel to Lac Alerty and marched on its brow, producing birch and maple trees. Past several small runs, too insignificant to insert, and then continued in a new course on a second mountain. The barn where we encamped or quartered, which was built by Jean Larty, from whom the lake is named, as also the lake adjacent to the house. 1759, March 28. The weather snowy with sleet. The party could not proceed before 8 o'clock in the morning. A west course, the land extremely good, producing birch, beech, and maple trees. No underwood, the course for the most part northwest. Marched through the remains of a village called Village d'Allemagne, burnt down. This spot was generally called by the French Le Désert, the land being open, free from trees. 'Twas inhabited by several Germans who received provisions and to settle a Shibukto. They deserted from thence to the island of St. John and were sent to Louisbourg, the governor of which place gave them a patent for this land. This village is terminated by the Sawmill Creek that runs out from the pond into the Lake Myra. After crossing the bridge commences another village called by the French Village de Rouillé, burnt, or horse town, situated on the ascent of Montagne Diable, or Devil's Mountain, whose descent leads to the lake and on which continues the remainder of the Village de Rouillé. These houses were built with logs and plastered, with small enclosures, picketed in and parallel to the road. Myra Lake at the ferriage or crossing is better than half a mile across, over when there is an extensive view of each side for near 5 miles northeast and southwest. Could not learn its depth, as 'twas froze over, but several bodies of old trees might be observed when the party returned, as 'twas a great thaw in that part of the ice where they appeared more open than the rest. On its opposite side, there is a post in the form of a cross which Chemin Raymond wrote on a piece of tin, painted blue, nailed thereon. There is one every 12 miles which were set up by the Comte de Raymond. Continued from thence a new course, for 3/4 of a mile to a barn that did belong to one Beaubassin, where they encamped or quartered. 1759, March 29th. The weather being bad till 10 o'clock, one of the party with 2 rangers went down Saint-Pierre River, which leads into the Myra Lake, about 3/4 of a mile this side from where the river opens into the lake. Was observed a creek that ran into the river, well dammed up, with a very good sawmill there, on with a good dwelling house in repair. 2 rooms in it, and but 1 fireplace, with an oven. There were several good berths or bed places built in the house, supposed for the sawyers and people belonging to the mill, and a large iron kettle capable of containing 4 gallons. This house is built with logs, squared, and has a loft. It is situated on a point of land, and the river and creek form kind of fork. There are several footboards and slabs, the quantity not specified, as the snow covered great part of it. About 12 o'clock, the weather clearing up, the party decamped and marched. The road leading round the house by reason of the swamp, betwixt it and Saint-Pierre River, the land very good, producing birch, beech, and maple trees. The course mostly northwest by north. Marched to a large opening that had been cultivated, about 5 miles from the barn, and 1 mile the south side of the mountains. This mountain was found the most difficult of any to march up, it being very steep, and the road made straight up for near 500 yards to the pitch, instead of being made in a serpentine manner, which would greatly have facilitated its access. There is a small fall of water that empties itself into this creek before they came to the mountain, about 50 feet perpendicular. This mountain and Montagne Diable formed the mountains of Myra. 1759, March 30th. At 6 o'clock in the morning, they decamped but were obliged to leave behind one of the party that fell sick, and one to attend him. They marched 3 miles to the foot of the Labrador Mountain, still a good soil and little underwood. They marched up the mountain to its summit for 3/4 of a mile, where stands Comte de Raymond's Cross, where Monsieur Lavue de Jambon, engineer employed making the road to St. Anne's, was buried. They continued their march to the Lake Labrador, the road running very irregular on account of the meandering of the creek that runs into the lake. The ground very deceitful, for near the cross they had a view of the lake appearing not to be above 1/4 of a mile from them, when 2 long miles from it. About 9 o'clock the party arrived at the lake, which they found very sloppy and about 8 inches water on the ice. They were resolved, notwithstanding, to overcome that difficulty. As that arm of the lake was little better than 3/4 of a mile across, when they were about halfway over, an observation was taken to know how the center of that arm run, which was found to bear west by south and east by west. They could not observe the west and southwest shore, though the weather was very clear. Ile Rouge, or Red Isle, bore from the entrance on the lake west by south about 10 miles, the opposite mountain appearing very steep. Our guide, with great care, cut through the ice with his tomahawk. When we were near 3 parts over, being extremely rotten and the water increasing on its surface, attended with small rain, when 'twas agreed by the party that instead of marching up the lake on the north side, to retire to the south side in order to secure a safe retreat in case of a thorough thaw, which was accordingly pursued, fearing to wet their bread. After marching 1 mile, they encamped on a side of a rivulet, which was quite open, as were all the mouths of those that emptied themselves into the lake. They sounded with a pole in some of the holes of the ice within 20 yards of the shore, and found it about 10 feet in depth, and 'tis said continues gradually so to the middle, which is about 30 fathoms. About 1 p.m., the guide, 1 sergeant, and 2 men were ordered up the lake to a point of land to form what observations they could in relation to the ice, in order to make a northern stretch, if possible, at break of day. The report on their return to the commanding officer of the party was that the ice was covered with upwards of 1 foot of water, that several parts of the lake appeared to them to be opened, and as the weather was open and seemed to be set in for rain, they thought 'twas not probable that they should proceed the next day. 1759, March 31st. The weather very open and a ground thaw, and the lake appearing in a manner open, 'twas concluded by the party to return to Louisbourg.